The delayed January jobs report released just a few moments ago, and it shows that the United States economy added 130,000 jobs last month, far more than the 55,000 that was expected. The unemployment rate also ticked down slightly to 4.3%. Joining us now, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett. He serves as director of the National Economic Council. Kevin, thank you for joining us this morning. This jobs report beat expectations pretty soundly.
Right.
In fact,
that's right.
There are members of the Trump administration, Peter Navarro and others, last night, seemingly doing some advanced spin, sort of suggesting hey, this might be rough. It's going to, and then it turned out not to be that way. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah. Oh, just a heads up on that, too, that Peter doesn't see the numbers the night before or anything. And so what happened is that there were a lot of Wall Street analysts who were predicting that a reduction in the labor force was going to make a bad number. And in fact, CNBC had a headline saying that the jobs number is going to be zero. Bloomberg had a headline saying the jobs number is going to be zero. And private sector jobs, which is our main focus right now because we've been reducing government employment, they went up 170,000. They absolutely blew out any expectation whatsoever. So it's really a remarkable, strong number. And to put it in perspective, to get that much job creation while that basically the labor force is declining some because people are leaving the country and being deported is a really remarkable thing. The bottom line is I'd say there's three facts that I think that I really hope that the viewers would think about. Thing one is that we've been hearing this story that artificial intelligence is going to take away people's jobs, right? Well, in this report, labor force participation is the highest it's been in the United States since 2001. And so we actually have more people going into the labor force than we've seen in 2 decades. And so that this AI effect is not there. The next thing is that the government employment, because President Trump's team has given people early retirement and so on, and the DOGE movements early in the spring, that we've reduced government employment, federal government employment, by 360,000 or so people. That's the lowest share of the labor force that's working for the federal government since 1966. And what that means is that $29 billion this year less will be spent on government salaries, and that helps reduce interest rates and balance the budget. So there's a heck of a lot of good news in this report.
Yeah, certainly. Polls do suggest that Americans have their questions about deportations and even the work of DOGE, but certainly the jobs report higher than expected. That is undeniable. Let's turn now to another matter. House Speaker Mike Johnson's bid to block any future votes on President Trump's tariffs did fail last night. 3 Republican lawmakers joined Democrats to defeat the measure 217 to 214. This now allows members of Congress the ability to immediately force a vote that would terminate Trump's tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and Brazil. Meanwhile, President Trump revealed that he punished a world leader with higher tariffs after he says he didn't like the leader's tone during a recent phone call. Here's what Trump told Fox Business yesterday.
I got an emergency call from, I believe, the Prime Minister of Switzerland, and she was very aggressive, but nice, but very aggressive. Sir, we are a small country. We can't do this. We can't do this. I couldn't get her off the phone. We are a small country. I said, you may be a small country, but we have a $42 billion deficit with you. No, we are a small country. Again and again and again. I couldn't get her off the phone. So it was at 30%. And I didn't really like the way she talked to us. And so instead of giving her a reduction, I raised it to 39%.
First, we should note there is no Prime Minister of Switzerland. The position doesn't exist. But this explanation appears to contradict what the Trump administration argued before the Supreme Court last November, that national security emergencies, that's what justifies his unilateral executive actions on tariffs. We are, of course, still waiting the Supreme Court's decision in that case. But Kevin, let's talk about this. The president and the administration has, explained these tariffs because it's of a national emergency. But doesn't stories like the one President Trump told Larry Kudlow that we just played undercut this emergency actions plan?
I don't think so at all. And frankly, I think it's just, the president has negotiated all these amazing trade deals where we've got the Japanese agreeing to accept our tariffs and also invest $500 billion more in the U.S. And so, like, going through the give and take of a negotiation, I think misses the big picture, as like does the action in the House. The bottom line is that because of President Trump tariff, we've got a booming economy. We've got a deficit that's gone down by maybe about $600 billion over the last year. That's $6-7 trillion over the next 10, which is leading us closer to a balanced budget. And we've got booming U.S. jobs. One of the things that we've seen in the jobs report today that we were talking about just earlier is that there's a massive amount of factory construction. So we made it so you could expense a factory if you build it in the first 4 years, and we've got 70,000 more people building factories right now because of the tariffs. And so, anyone who would look at the data and cares about America up on Capitol Hill would support the president's tariffs. And it's very disappointing to the president. I was in the Oval yesterday, and I could see that he was very disappointed in the people that they're just the few people that are basically in all-out denial about the effectiveness of these tools.
Well, we'll have to see what measures come from those legislators now that this is passed. And of course, we all do await the Supreme Court ruling.
Sure.
Director Hassett, one more for you. During an interview on Fox News yesterday, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, a Republican, criticized the Trump administration's handling of the economy in the first year of his second term. Now, Haley was reacting to a recent Fox News poll, which we're showing there, that found nearly 40% of people surveyed said they are worse off financially compared to a year ago.
There has not been enough focus on the affordability issue for Americans. You still have too many kids living at home. You still have people who can't deal with rent. You see people, they have less money in their wallets, and you can't look at the stock market and say the economy is doing well. We are looking at now $39 trillion in debt. Social Security is going to run out in over 6 years, leaving 75 million Americans having to make a choice. Something needs to be done. This is not, fiscal conservatism has not been talked about at all during this administration. And I think now is the time to focus on the value of a dollar, which is weakening, on how we get more money in Americans' pockets, how we increase jobs, which are flattening, and start to make American people feel like they can have hope. And that's the one thing I want Republicans to really fight for going into the midterms, because if Americans don't feel like there's some hope with their wallets and some hope in raising their families, we will lose.
Now, Director Hassett, former Governor Haley went on to say that she is glad President Trump won election in 2024, but she voiced some real concerns about his handling of the economy. What's your response?
There's an enormous amount of factually challenged information coming out of former Governor Haley's mouth right there. The bottom line is that we just had a Michigan survey about how people are feeling about the economy that skyrocketed, and it skyrocketed because wages are growing so fast that people look at their wallets and they say, geez, the Trump economy is working. And so I guess what's going to happen is that after the midterm that we're going to start to see political season where even Republicans who maybe want to run for president are attacking President Trump, but it's really out of line. The fact is, as you saw, it's even ironic that you would play that quote precisely on a day where we had a really historic job number, and then she said that fiscal conservatism is not on the agenda. Well, oh my goodness, we just reduced the deficit $600 billion by the most ever this year because of higher growth and tariffs and cutting government spending, cutting the government workers. And so I think Governor Haley was just wrong on every single count. I really was disappointed in what she had to say.
All right. Well, we appreciate your candor. White House Economic Advisor Kevin Hassett, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.